You're listening to She's the Business podcast.
How does somebody who is a complete novice when it comes to podcasting and has no knowledge about really what it takes to host a podcast achieve a top 5% podcast? Well, it's down to 5 core principles, and that's exactly what we're covering today. But these principles are not just about podcasting. These are key principles that you can apply to anything that you're doing to market your business. So even if you don't have a podcast, this episode is still for you. Stay tuned. It's coming right up.
Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Osborne, and in my 23 years of business and marketing, I've built many brands to become multi-billion-dollar companies. And just in the last 10 years, I've built 2 online businesses of my own from my dining room table with 2 little babies running around at my feet. I've made it my mission to inspire you to get out of your own way and become the successful business owner who's living the lifestyle you really desire without all the hustle. This is She's the Business podcast, made by women for women. This is your weekly dose of motivation and inspiration.
Well, hello there today. So excited to have you with me. This is episode 198 of She's the Business podcast. So we're just 2 episodes away from the magical 200. And I do have something special planned for the 200th episode. Gosh, that was hard to say. But I thought today, well, why not do a little bit of a background story on the podcast, what it's taken to get to this point, what I think has been some of the key success factors that have got me here, which aren't about the podcast really, but they can be applied to so many other things that you're doing in your marketing, in your business. They're really what I would call core principles of success with marketing, which obviously being principles means that you can then apply them. So even if you don't have a podcast or you're not even considering creating one, then you're still going to get a lot of value out of today's conversation. So don't go anywhere. We're about to get into it. First, I thought, why not just talk a little bit about what has happened with She's a Business podcast. So as I said, we've achieved a top 5% global rank via Listen Notes, which was exciting. I only just found that out a few weeks ago because it was the first time I had heard about it. That's my novice podcasting coming through. That has been a podcast that I launched it back in September of 2021. So we're now June 2024, very nearly 3 years old. And every week there has been a new episode dropped. In fact, actually, for the first year of the podcast, I did 2 episodes a week, but I'm going to get more into that in a moment. Some other key stats for you just before we dive into what these 5 principles are that have enabled this kind of success. I've had 20,000 downloads approximately. I did change platforms partway through, and as always, where nothing is perfect, I don't have the analytics from the original platform, but I'm estimating it is around the 20,000 mark. Now, this year alone, we're already on track to make well over 10,000 downloads this year. So that's going to be obviously a huge amount of growth, because 20,000 since I began it in 2021 versus already over 10,000 this year. You can see how it is, the momentum is building over time, and that is really starting to get some speed happening, which is fantastic. I love to see the listens, the downloads, people tuning in, and of course the wonderful reviews that people have been leaving as well. Each one of them is just so appreciated and so special. Right, they were the core stats. So you're wondering, what are these 5 principles that have really enabled somebody with no podcasting experience? No, I didn't do a course. I'd never done a podcast. I'd listened to some, but I didn't have any background in radio, in production, in any of that. So how did I manage to launch a podcast, have weekly episodes, and reach this place where it's now ranked global 5%? So let's start off. I think one of the first things was actually collaboration. One of my key principles with this podcast was about how can I use this to build relationships with other people, build my network, and make it a collaborative effort. So it's really just not all on me. It's not me, one person driving this whole thing, but actually I have a collaborative approach with the podcast, meaning that even right from the beginning, it was always a matter of one guest episode, one solo episode. So 50% of the episodes that are now published with a guest speaker, which means that the load of the content creation was definitely a lot lower for me than it is for somebody who's attempting to create a solo podcast and only have themselves speaking. Now, while I love to talk, and I do love my solo episodes, you'll notice they're usually a lot shorter than the ones with guests. However, I've really found so much value in the whole collaboration with my beautiful guests that I bring on. It's not only been an opportunity for me to, add some extra support and exposure for my clients, but I've used that guesting opportunity to enable me to reach out into the entrepreneurial space, to meet some amazing women doing other things, and actually form some relationships and friendships with them that have lasted far beyond the podcast episode that we recorded together. It's also enabled me to become guests on other podcasts without needing to go on a great big pitching mission across the internet, because the beautiful thing is when you find somebody who's also a podcaster and their podcast is relevant for me and my message, we've got a really nice alignment there, then it usually becomes really simple to do an episode for each other on each other's podcast. So collaboration, the principle of collaboration, has absolutely been one of the key drivers of She's the Business. Now, number 2 is kind of related to that. I had really clear boundaries and ideas on what was the purpose of my podcast, who did I want to have on it, who is it for, and I was very willing to say no to people who were not the right fit. Because you get a lot of applications as a podcast host, a lot of people reaching out, just wanting some airtime, wanting some space. They're like, I've written a book, I want to talk about it. And so they reach out to podcasters just hoping to get onto somebody's podcast and talk about their stuff. But as a podcast listener myself, I know that the episodes that I love to hear the most are the ones that felt really valuable, the ones that were a really great conversation and not purely about the guest and, just them having an interview that was mainly selling their stuff. And I've heard some of those episodes, and it does happen for sure, but that wasn't the flavor I wanted to bring to She's the Business. So there's nothing against that. Absolutely. And, maybe some people enjoy those interviews with different authors or founders or whoever they are being interviewed. But I really find I like to take it to that next step and feel like I'm my audience. So I'm going to ask the person questions that I'm interested in, that I want to know more about, and have a bit of a conversation, add in some of my own experiences or insights or personal stories where it's appropriate, and, turn it into much more of a chat that we're having for the benefit of other people as well. So that was my premise around the style of podcast that I wanted to host, and having that clear understanding of who it's for, what kind of things I wanted to talk about and bring in, because, what's the role of the guest for me? Well, I didn't want to bring in a whole raft of guests who basically do talk about the same stuff I talk about, because then it's going to be really boring. So I wanted to bring in guests who had different flavors to add in. And because this podcast is for female entrepreneurs, as the person who is the driving force of your business, yes, it's about business strategy. Yes, it's about marketing strategy and the things about running your business, but it's also about you as a person, as a human, as an entrepreneur. And so much success is about some of the other environmental factors around us, meaning, how are we looking after ourselves? How is our mind, our body, our spirit? What are all the things that actually all combine together to give us that success? And that's why She's the Business is this beautiful blend of a bit of everything that we need as women running a business to be successful in our businesses. So I'm always looking for, oh, that's an interesting new topic or new angle or a different flavor of something that I can bring to the podcast, to the audience, to you, and that you feel like there's always something really valuable being shared here on the podcast. So that was principle number 2, was being really clear on the vision and being able to say no to things that did not fit the vision. So my third principle was about consistency. I did a whole episode on consistency at one point, and, really for me with consistency, this was like, if I'm committing to doing the podcast, then I'm committing to doing it. And my first year, I did commit to 2 episodes a week. That was a lot. I did it for a whole year. And then at the end of that year, I thought, okay, I'm going to drop it back to 1 episode a week, because my business is not the podcast. Some people start a podcast and it becomes a business, whereas I have a business and then I'm using the podcast as my content machine. So it has a different purpose for me than it does for other people. And I knew that consistency is really important. I wanted you to know that every week, every Wednesday, which it is for me in Australia, it might be your Tuesday evenings, but every week on the same day, there's a new episode dropping. And because there is that consistency and that rhythm, you know that there's always a new one coming. And we've kept that up ever since the very first week, which I'm super proud of, because I'd have to say that I am not naturally that kind of person that is super structured in that way. And, if you said that to me, guess what? You're going to start a podcast and you'll put out a weekly episode for years and years and years without stopping. I would think, I don't think that's me you're talking about. That's probably somebody else. However, what's enabled me to do that, because I am a creative, I'm not robotic, I don't have a set schedule because I have kids and, life and all sorts of other things going on. So I don't record once a week. But what has enabled me to do that is pre-recording, pre-planning, and actually getting ahead of the game. So, I have guest episodes recorded. They're in the bank, as I like to call it. They're ready to come out and be published. And I've already got that schedule literally planned out in advance, months in advance at the moment. So even though this episode is being recorded as it happens, my guest episodes are already done. There is no stress about it. Like, they are there, they're ready to go. All my editor has to do is pick them up and do the editing, and then we publish. So having that has meant that I'm able to be consistent. It's just my own solo episodes are the ones that I can, record a bunch of them. If I know that I'm going to be away on holiday or I don't want to be doing any recording for a while, then I can record some in advance. Sometimes I like to be recording them kind of every couple of weeks, because it means that I can bring to you fresh perspectives, something very current, something that I'm seeing that's going on out there, and I can be much more responsive to the different tones and the different trends that I'm seeing, which I think helps to bring that, that real flavor of currency to the podcast. So that's the way I do it, but it's definitely enabled me to be consistent with the content. And so every week there's a new episode. Every week my email subscribers get an email from me with something about the topic of that episode. They don't have to listen in if they don't want to. I do try to give quite a lot of value in the emails as well. And then obviously if they want to go deeper, then they can click through and listen to the episode. So that's enabled such a lot of consistency, but it's so easy as well, because there is just that flow and that process, and it's just happening once a week. So that was the third principle of consistency. Now, something that's, I guess, enabled that to happen without it being a real headache is the processes that I've put in place. And I'd have to say the podcast is probably the area of the business that I'm most proud of, with the way that the process is so locked down. It's so consistent. I have a couple of people who do different things with the podcast, and it just happens like clockwork every single week. And a new episode comes out, and it is so easy for me. I don't have to micromanage anybody. We know what's happening, who's doing it, when it needs to be done by, and it just happens. Now, it didn't take actually much effort to set that up. it just took that time to define, right, what do we need to happen? Who's responsible? And let's template it. So once that's done, it really is like a machine. And I can focus on my bit, which is recording the episodes, and the other parts are being taken care of, which is fantastic. So processes, putting that structure in place means that you don't have to be thinking about it all the time. Even if you're producing something yourself, having the process is removing your brain processing and that effort and the energy of having to think about what is it I need to do next? What is it I need to do next? When you've got that in a clear structure and you just know it, then it is making life so much easier for you. Your brain will feel a lot less pressure. It'll feel a lot less stressed, and you'll be able to accomplish that with far more ease when you've got that process in place. So highly recommend it. It does really create freedom for you to have that kind of structure and process in your business. And obviously, think about what else you have. So I mentioned a moment ago that every episode I also send out an email to my list. Well, that's part of the process. When we create an episode, then, there's a transcript, there are show notes that get created, there's an email draft that gets created, that gets put in there. And then there's a task to edit it. I always edit that myself and add in a whole lot of my personal thoughts and insights. And then that gets sent out once a week. So think about, well, where could you apply that right now in your business? Not that you might need to do something every week, but what's a consistent activity that you want to be doing? And do you have a formal set process around that so that it makes life easier for you? And it's super easy to, if you can bring in somebody to support you, you can literally hand that over and they can own it. That's a really great question, something to have a think about. The fifth principle that I absolutely stand by more than anything is a focus on excellence over perfection. Now, I used to think that perfectionism was a really great strength of mine, and it may have been back in the days when I worked as a marketing executive and I worked for banks, and things were highly detailed focused. Nothing could be incorrect. Everything had to be perfect. There wasn't a lot of room for error. Whereas in this sort of business, in entrepreneurship, and in most businesses, to be honest, unless they are at that level of regulation and highly legal focused, their excellence is what you're striving for as opposed to perfection. It's very hard to reach perfection. And if we're trying to reach perfection, then you're always going to feel like you're never making it. You're never there. It's never good enough because it's like you've set this impossible bar for yourself. When you strive for excellence instead, excellence is like, I'm doing the best I can. This is the absolute best effort that I can do with what I've got, with where I am, with the resources I have, and the time that I have available. I'm striving for excellence, which means that, I'm not just settling for, oh, well, good enough, that'll do. It's like, no, this is actually the very best that I can do right now. And that, yes, there's always room for improvement. There is, I don't know anything in all of my years of marketing where there was something that couldn't have been improved. There is always a way you can improve it. So thinking about excellence instead of perfection is so much more open-minded, growth mindset focused, and enables you to actually move forward, get things done, and feel good about yourself, which helps you to do it better next time, rather than laying on the shame or the guilt of all the reasons why it wasn't perfect. Now, that doesn't mean that, I'm just thinking, I don't need to check anything and, spelling and grammar is just going completely to the pot. That's not happening. Maybe that's my personal preference as well. I grew up with a mum who's an English teacher. She was always very proper with her language. And, for me, I can't unlearn the copywriting and the proofing that I did as a marketer for 25 years. So it's inbuilt within me, but that doesn't mean like if there is a mistake that it's the end of the world. It's like, oh, well, something slipped through. That's not such a problem. Things happen, don't they? But I'm striving always for excellence. So I'm not intentionally just letting it go or being lazy with it. No, I'm absolutely putting focus into what I'm doing. And the thing that's kind of allowed that excellence to happen is, I guess, a sneaky sixth principle that I only just thought of. So I'll just share it with you anyway. But it is really what I've been on for the last year or two has been focusing on doing less in my business, but doing it better. And by doing less, it does enable you to do what you are doing better, with more focus, with more attention. And of course, that enables you to strive for excellence because you have more time to apply to it. So they're my 5 core principles. That is what She's a Business has been created on. I hope you've been enjoying listening to the podcast. I do love to hear your reviews and your comments. They are so much fun. And make sure that you are following, because I do have something special planned for the 200th episode. Really excited to bring that one to you, which will be coming out the week after next. Next week, you will be having a beautiful guest sharing some of their amazing story and expertise with you. I won't spill the beans on what all that is right now. You're going to have to subscribe so that you get the podcast in your feed and tune in to listen in to see what is going to happen. And until then, see you later.
Isn't it just so frustrating when you know that out there are so many people that actually need your help, and there's many actively looking for somebody just like you, yet all you seem to attract are the odd tire kicker or really uncommitted client that's kind of dabbling, and they don't light you up. They really don't get great results. And you're thinking, what does it actually take to attract clients who are committed, who are happy to pay proper prices for what it is that I do, and that I can help to have really great results? What is it going to take? Well, it's not in the activity of what you're doing. Here's the thing. It's usually something else that's a bit deeper. And I'm sharing with you what that is in my training. It's called 5 Keys to Premium Paying Clients. And I'm going to share with you what are these 5 things that you need to have in your strategy so that no matter what tactic or activity you choose to do, it actually works. It works. You attract the right clients, the ones who are ready to work with you, the ones who are ready to pay and sign up. So get yourself over to my website now on jessicaosborne.com/TMF. Register for this free class and let's dive right in. So once again, that's jessicaosborne.com/TMF. And the link is below in the show notes as well. I encourage you to register now, allocate just over an hour of your time, maybe up to an hour and a half, so you can take some notes and really reflect on the things that I share with you in this class. And let's change your year this year. Let's make your business actually turn into your dream business together.